G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I would like to give Surfshark a big shout out for sponsoring this episode. In an ocean of online content, there's a lot of websites that take your info without you even knowing it. But you too can swim under the radar by using Surfshark VP. So Surfshark is a modern VPN designed with the user in mind. Their utilities are powered by robust security mechanisms, but designed to be simple and intuitive to use. You can enjoy all the freedoms of an open internet safely and anonymously. As you guys are probably well aware of too, internet security and freedom is a hot topic these days, and in my opinion, both are incredibly important, especially for any of you guys in Europe who have Article 13 taking effect soon. I don't know if you guys remember too, but it wasn't that long ago that Owlmine was able to hack my YouTube channel, and I was really worried for some time about having my information shared on the internet. And so I recently signed up to Surfshark for internet security myself, and I must admit that I really appreciated just how easy it was to set up. I also love the fact that with Surfshark running, I can surf the web with no ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts. You can also connect an unlimited amount of devices, which was great for my own house where I have like 200 separate devices. And one of the best things too is that there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So all you have to do, guys, is use the promo code SCARED to get 85% off plus 3 extra months for free. And as I mentioned, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's absolutely no risk. Surf with your own set of rules. And as always, the link is in the description. So this actually happened to a rather close friend of mine. He told me this story a few hours ago, and I wanted to share it here. For the purpose of this story too, I'll call my friend Jordan. Anyways, he lives in Hayward and was attending a march for the BLM movement at around 4 PM, I think. I don't know what street or anything specific like that. He just sent me a couple of videos of the crowd marching and taking a knee and whatnot. So, after about 10 minutes though, he said that they were passing through a street line with shops and alleyways. There was an older man sitting on a curb by one alleyway watching the march. Jordan describes the man as looking upper 40s, wearing a black and white flannel shirt, jeans and cap. And Jordan had the misfortune of walking nearby said alleyway, and the man stopped him, saying something along the lines of that he needed help fixing his passenger seat since the recliner handle was broken and it was a 2-person job to get it back into its upright position. The man gestured towards his car, which Jordan examined. It was a black Chevy Malibu that was parked in possibly the most sketchiest part of the alley, right towards the back, kind of hidden behind a trash dumpster. Jordan declined and quickly walked away before the man could say anything else. And for his sake, I wish the story ended there, but I wouldn't be sharing this if it did. I think sometime later, like an hour maybe, Jordan decided to start heading home while the march continued. He says that he was cutting across some field that was in between houses where only 2 other people were in sight, and as soon as he emerged to the other side, his air was suddenly cut off as a thick arm wrapped around his throat and began aggressively yanking him backwards. Of course, Jordan yelled as loud as he could, and thankfully the aforementioned 2 guys began to rush to his aid, shouting at Jordan's attacker. The guy let go and pushed Jordan, and as Jordan stumbled forwards, he spun around and saw the guy who had asked him for help with his car hopping into the Chevy Malibu and speeding off. The 2 other people asked Jordan if he was okay and comforted him and whatnot. Keep in mind that Jordan only told me this over a few texts and I haven't gotten a chance to talk to him in public about it, so some more details may have been spared. I think Jordan contemplated calling the police at one stage, but didn't think that it was worth it in the end. He told me that they were probably busy enough anyway, and he might be ignored or have an extremely long response time, to which the only info that he had was a description of the guy anyway. Unfortunately, he just hadn't gotten the guy's license plate. Jordan went home after this though, and that's pretty much all that he's told me so far. And I know that it might sound cliche, but please, everyone stay safe out there. These are terrible times, and with all the looting and the protests and stuff like that, things like this are just bound to happen. So allow me to set the stage for this. I was young at the time that this took place. I was a Marine and I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan. Not too far from my platoon's patrol base, 3 or 6 kilometers or so, was this structure that looked like a castle. Through interpreted conversations with locals, we were actually able to determine that they believed it was built by Alexander the Great. But whether that was true or not, I'll never know, but let me tell you that this place looked absolutely ancient. So, being Marines, we did the only thing that we thought was prudent at the time. We went out on patrol with the intent of setting up an OP inside the structure. We took our Afghan border police with us. When we got closer to the structure and our Afghans figured out what we were up to, they just refused to go any further. But before they left, they kept repeating the same word over and over. But don't ask me to remember what it was, because this was like a decade ago, and there is no way that I can remember that. But what I do know now is that they were trying to warn us of something evil. We went in anyway, though, without our Afghans, with the intent of staying there overnight. This place was basically an ancient fort with mud and clay brick walls on 4 sides. It also had some sort of a building in the middle, so we set security up, made sure we had comm checks with our patrol base, and they had an updated position report on us, so they knew where we were in case we got into trouble. And darkness fell. Not too long after that, I went up to take my turn on the wall with my friend, watch for anyone that might be trying to sneak up on us, and many other Taliban-related shenanigans. And not even 20 minutes into our shift was when the weird stuff started going down. The entire time that I was on the wall, I just felt watched from all sides. I turned to see a figure walking along the wall, not far from where we were sitting. I saw walking, but it was sort of a robed figure that looked to me almost floating. I turned to my friend to see if he saw it too, and he said that he did, but when he got his night vision back on, it was his turn to rest. The figure was just gone. We didn't see anything else after that for the rest of our shift, though. We sort of uneasily finished and went to rest, where I ended up dozing off at some point. I don't really know what happened next, too, but I woke up to a completely black figure literally squatting on my chest. When I went to yell for help, too, nothing came out, and it felt like I had a hand over my mouth. I reached for my knife. I was a machine gunner and couldn't just grab my machine gun, and felt like something was pinning my arm to the ground. I tried to squirm free but couldn't move, so I bit down as hard as I could on what felt like a hand on my mouth. At this point, whatever weight was on me instantly disappeared, and I could move and I could talk again. I was obviously freaking out, and my brothers who were around me saw me as well. My training had kicked in, and I was trying my best to keep quiet and not pass out because I was hyperventilating. My squad mates calmed me down, and after telling them what had happened, they all admitted to having the creeps and a feeling of being watched the whole time that we were there too. None of us could really sleep after that, and we all basically sat back to back for the rest of the night when we weren't on watch. We were pretty freaked out, and so every noise and rustle of the wind made it even worse in the total silence of that ancient fort in that ancient desert. If you haven't experienced the silence of an open desert in a part of the world where there is absolutely zero light and noise pollution, then I suppose it's probably hard to appreciate just how any noise in a place like that in the middle of the night, in total darkness when you're already alert to sounds of the enemy and now on even higher alert from something that you can't understand, is just about the scariest thing anyone can ever experience. I really don't think I'll ever experience that kind of fear again in my life, ever. To finish quickly though, as soon as the sun came up we left, and everyone was totally scared and none of us spoke about it again to each other. We never went back to that area again as well, and I still suffer from nightmares and sleep paralysis because of my personal experience that night in that place. And the scariest part of this whole thing, though, is that I know that it's probably just in my head. But that's my, I guess, ghost story for you guys. And if you stuck it out, then thank you. I appreciate that you've let me get this off my chest. So, I've been wanting to post this for a while now, but I just really haven't gotten around to it. But I think it's time that I do. So I, a 33-year-old female, live at a funeral home owned and run by my dad. I live in an apartment upstairs and do some side work for my dad, but I don't work for the funeral home per se. Since I live here though, I tend to interact with a lot of people who are here for funeral-related things and whatnot. I represent my dad when I'm speaking to someone here, so I'm always nice and helpful. And I'll admit that I've had a couple of crazy people that I've dealt with, but nothing like this one. This was in mid-March sometime because it was right at the beginning of the whole COVID takeover. I had gone to pick up some food for my family around 6 p.m. Unless there is a service, the employees are usually gone, and I believe it was a Saturday as well. So I pull into my parking lot, and as I park, a car drives by me going towards the entrance side. It was a dark SUV, and there are so many people who work here who have similar cars that I couldn't see from that far who it was, but I gave a quick wave thinking that it was somebody that I knew. Bad idea. So the car stops, and this guy gets out. Like I said, I'm used to having to help people and tell them where they can go and drop things off or pick stuff up, etc. So this guy gets out and comes towards my car. I roll down my window a little, expecting to just say hello and tell him that nobody's here working. He comes right over to my window and starts leaning in and peering into my car, which was obviously a red flag already. It was very invasive. In fact, I'm now glad that my doors were locked and I only put it down a little bit. But this dude basically had his head in my car and it really creeped me out. But before anything else, his eyes just really scared me. He was really pale with bright red hair, and his eyes were literally the craziest and scariest eyes that I've ever seen. It was chilling, and I don't know if he was on drugs or just crazy, but I'm already uncomfortable at this point. But he starts to talk to me and ask me if I work here and blah blah blah. I tell him no one is working. Please call tomorrow in the morning and you can speak to someone. And honestly, I thought that would be it. Not even close though. This man came to bring me an application to my father to work for the funeral home. He was apparently in IT or something, but had studied embalming and also volunteered for the Red Cross or something. He was just talking a mile a minute, and I was so incredibly uncomfortable, but even more so when he started to tell me about how certain embalming techniques he studied included hanging cadavers by their feet and other just insane and really sick stuff. He had absolutely no experience in embalming though. He cornered me in my car for 15 minutes and just rambled. I told him several times, please call tomorrow morning, I really can't help you. So now I'm sitting here in my car with this insane man outside of my car, and I also had food on my seat. He was looking into my car, so he saw it. You would think that he would take the hint. At some point, I texted my husband and said, come outside now. Thank God that he actually saw my text and came out too. He comes up to this guy though, and he was like, can I help you? And then the guy starts cornering my husband too. This guy had absolutely no idea what personal space was, and my husband kept backing up and he would move closer every time. I took an opportunity to grab the food and get out since he was outside, and when I got out, he started telling my husband and I this virus is going around and there are going to be dead bodies piling up. They're going to need extra help here when there are hundreds of bodies dead. And the creepiest part was that it almost sounded like he was excited at that thought. He had a resume, and I told him multiple times to please bring it by again. I didn't even want to touch anything that he had, but he forced it into my husband's hands. I went to the stairs and gave my husband a concerned look and motioned for him to come in. This guy just made me so extremely nervous, and I didn't want my husband out there any longer. But this guy was almost impossible to walk away from. He just didn't understand that this conversation was done. But eventually, we managed to get away from this freak and we got inside. I immediately called my dad to explain what had happened, and warn him of this guy. I told my dad that I had never felt more uncomfortable in my life, and there was something seriously wrong with this guy. I wanted to warn him that he would probably be back the next day, and oh, did he come back. A couple of days later, mid-morning, I'm upstairs in my apartment, and there are several employees in the office upstairs. I hear someone ring the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. He then proceeded to ring it non-stop for 15 minutes. They assumed it was him and didn't answer. I went out and was like, what the heck is with the doorbell? They knew it was him apparently because he had called earlier and wanted to talk to my dad, and one of the employees told him that we aren't hiring, but he insisted on talking to my dad, so he came by. Then, after the doorbell went off for several minutes, the phone started ringing off the hook. Next, he was going around to all the windows and pounding on them relentlessly. I had actually told them how crazy he was, but I was sort of glad that they could now see what I meant and that I wasn't overreacting. Eventually, my older brother went down, with a mask on. Like I said, this was right in the beginning and people weren't even wearing masks regularly, but this guy had no boundaries. He then cornered my brother the same way and would not let him leave and end the conversation. We were all just thinking, what the heck is wrong with this guy? My dad didn't want to talk to him, but he just wouldn't give up. Next day, he comes back again, same thing, banging on the windows and ringing the bell, calling incessantly. And eventually my dad's secretary answered the phone and put this guy in his place and told him that if he called again, that they would be calling the cops. The best part too is that every time he showed up in full, top to bottom, biker gear, spandex, helmet, knee pads, you name it, even though he apparently lived just a few streets over. This guy, man, was just absolutely crazy, and I'm so thankful that he hasn't come back yet. This happened 25 years ago. I was 17 years old, 5 foot tall, and at the most 95 pounds soaking wet. On this day, I was driving a few friends home after spending all day at this lake, and because of this, I was wearing a bikini with some cut-off shorts. I was just about to drop off my last passenger, who was in the back seat, and head home. I'd just come off the freeway and turned on the main road into town. As I pulled up to a red light, there was an ambulance in the lane to my left pulling up alongside of me. Shortly after, the light turned green and we all moved forward. I heard the whoop of the siren. I checked my mirrors and then looked to my left and saw the ambulance driver had his window down and was yelling at me, telling me to pull over. I was initially confused as the siren had only been on for a small moment. I wondered if I had somehow missed seeing their lights on or something, that maybe they needed me to pull over so that they could pass for an emergency. But I was even more surprised and confused when the ambulance pulled up right next to me and the driver got out and approached my door. He then asked me to step out of the vehicle to speak with him. I was confused, so I asked why I was being pulled over. He again asked me to step out of the car with my license and registration. So I grabbed my license and registration out of the glove compartment and stepped out of the car and said, "I didn't think an ambulance could pull you over like this." My friend in the back seat piped up at that moment, saying that there was something off about this. The driver's eyes grew wide and he leaned into the car window, telling my friend to shut up unless he'd like to be in the pair of cuffs. I again asked why he was pulling me over. This wasn't like any time I'd been pulled over in the past, and the looks that the ambulance driver had been given me until now were making me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I felt just really exposed, so I brought my arms up over my chest. The hair on my arms was standing on end and my gut was churning. The driver told me that he pulled me over due to my car not having a front license plate, but then I thought that he wouldn't have been able to have seen that until he pulled up and got out of the vehicle. But I did have one in the front passenger side of the windshield, so I didn't have a place to attach a license plate in the front of my car. I tried to point out that I had one in the windshield, but he just kept saying how much trouble I was in and that he needed my driver's license and registration. He then kept talking over me and yelling at me for any of my questions. He sounded incredibly angry, and he eventually made a big deal of telling me that I was so lucky that he was letting me off with a warning and that I better not let it happen again. The whole thing was just really bizarre and left me feeling nervous and off balance. Looking back at everything now, though, it felt like he was trying to keep me scared so I wouldn't question things. He didn't have a name tag on or anything, or show me a badge too. He didn't have any official ticket paper. I didn't see a partner in the ambulance, and I really feel like he was counting on my youth and insecurity or fear to keep me compliant. I also think that I was lucky to have a friend in my car to witness everything, and quite honestly, I feel like that may have actually put a stop to whatever was in the driver's mind and made him so angry. I remember going home just really worried about everything, analysing everything about the encounter and freaking out that he had my personal information now. I mean, I was already living on my own and not close to my family at that time, so I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could talk to about it. But I calmed down a bit once I remembered that my ID and registration were actually not up to date yet. I had actually moved twice that year and hadn't updated anything yet. This was in the mid-90s, so no online databases like there are now. Obviously, the whole thing freaked me out for sure, and there was just something really malicious about this guy that I still can't put my finger on. So my mum grew up in a place called Echo Lake. She lived right on the lake in a relatively new house. She said that it was built in the 60s, and she lived there from 1990 to 1994. But nothing tragic or unfortunate had happened in the house, to her knowledge anyway. But still, some creepy things went on in it. My mum, her sister Beth, and her brother Ben all had separate rooms, though by 1994 they were all sharing one bedroom as they never wanted to be alone in there. So, to get on to the story, my mum had a closet in her room. It was a regular closet with a regular door, except the door never wanted to stay closed. It would always open by itself, no matter what she did to it. She even went so far as to have her dad change the doorknob on it. And well, one night, the door just kept opening as per usual. She had a big oak desk in her bedroom, so she decided to push the desk in front of the closet door to keep it closed. And after she did this, the door handle started to rattle, and the door started to forcibly push the desk forward and away. My mother, obviously freaked out, was frozen on her bed watching in horror as a small boy with red eyes appeared from the closet. She said that he just sat down on a desk and just stared at her, watching. She finally got the courage to call for her dad, and he came into her room. When he opened the bedroom door, the boy just disappeared. Her dad looked all over the room, as my mum was visibly shaken because she thought that someone had broken into their house. Her dad couldn't find anyone in there, but as he walked back into his room, my mum said that she saw the boy go into Ben's room, and that was when Ben woke up and started to cry as well. By then, the whole house was awake. Ben described to their dad and my mum what had happened. He said, "I saw a little boy with red eyes come into my bedroom. He sat down on my bed and just stared at me." And that was the last time that they ever saw the boy. But one time, my Aunt Beth was having a sleepover in a house, and my aunt said that the girl had started screaming when she was changing in her room. She said that she had seen a little boy, and that he had smiled at her. Beth said that the girl was so freaked out, in fact, that afterwards, she called her parents to just come and pick her up. In 2015, I was a freshman in college. I roomed with my best friend Emily from high school. Before leaving for college, we had done some research and found rumors online that our dorm building was haunted, but we didn't take it seriously. We lived on the second floor, and our room was in between the stairwell and the laundry room. The first month went totally normal, and we were settled into our new routines. But one day, when I got home from class and walked into the room, everything was open. All the drawers on both of our desks, the dressers, and tall standing wardrobes. I mean everything. My first thought was that someone must have broken into our room and robbed us, but Then that didn't make much sense because you could only access our room with 2 keycards. One was mine and the other was Emily's. Nobody else's keycards would have been able to unlock our door. I called Emily to see if she was in class, but she was in the bathroom down the hall. When she came back, I showed her the room, and she said it wasn't like that when she left. At the time, we both thought it was the other one playing a prank, but neither of us said it. And over the next couple of months, more things started happening that proved to both of us that it wasn't the other one playing pranks. We often came home to everything being open, but that wasn't just it. At night, we would both be in bed, and we could hear our laundry basket being dragged across the floor and things falling off of our shelves. On one occasion, when we were in our beds and the lights were out, I actually sneezed, and I clearly heard someone say, "Bless you." When I said thank you, thinking that it was Emily, I looked across the room and realized that she was asleep. I also heard "hello" whispered in my ear a few times. Another time at night, I was up late studying and Em was asleep. I felt like I was being watched all night, but just told myself that I was tired and just being paranoid. But I just couldn't shake the feeling. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a light shove on my back. Obviously, this scared the absolute crap out of me, so I got up to yell at Emily, but then saw that she was still in her bed. Once, when Emily was in her room by herself, she was on the phone with her dad talking about all the weird stuff that had been happening to us, and, of course, right on cue, all at once, every single drawer just flew open. After about a month of us being terrified, we got up the courage to talk to our RHD about pretty much everything. We started with something like, "So, we had a weird question about our room." When she stopped us and said, "Let me guess, stuff is moving around and you don't know why." And I mean, excuse me? What? She said every year that she gets reports from the people that live in that room with stories the same as ours. It's happened for years, she said, and she told us that it was the ghost of a little girl named Sarah who was known to be mischievous and liked to mess around. To be honest, this part of the story I'm not sure I buy 100%, but it made us feel a bit better to tell ourselves that it was just a little girl. Anyway, after a couple of months, things settled down and occurrences became less frequent. We eventually felt comfortable in our room, and if something happened, we would just tell ourselves that it was Sarah messing around with us again and just brush it off. Even though we were scared at times, we both agreed that nothing ever felt evil or sinister. It did indeed just seem like a mischievous spirit, but either way, we never taunted it or tried to talk to it. So, everything I'm about to tell you happened before my parents divorced. We were all living in a 2-story house with an attic and a basement. It was a normal house for a family of 5, my parents, me, and my 2 siblings. At night, my parents were sleeping on the first floor and me and my siblings on the second floor. Now, I always felt really uncomfortable in this house, especially when I was upstairs. I don't really know why, but I just felt really anxious and nervous. And my brother also felt the same. Some stuff happened to the 2 of us, like he heard some voices calling him and even a knock in the attic. When I was alone in the house and I was in my bedroom, I would hear as if someone was moving the chairs in the living room. But recently my sister told me that she once heard the same thing. But even if it was scary, we were used to it and we would find rational explanations to those sounds, like maybe a rodent in the attic or our neighbor was moving her chairs. I don't know. However, there is still one event that me and my brother still can't explain, all these years later. So it happened 5 or 6 years ago, and it was around 3 a.m. I remember I was feeling quite anxious for no reason, and that's why I decided to text one of my friends instead of trying to go to sleep. My sister used to sleepwalk, but actually stopped after we moved, and this night, as she usually did, she went out of her bed, walked a bit in the hall, and went back to her room. The walls were very thin in this house, so I heard her when she closed her door and went back into her bed, and that was it. She didn't move again. But after that, somebody was still walking in the hall. I first thought it was my brother, that I didn't hear him go out of his bedroom or something like that, but as I was about to check on him, it stopped, and that's when I heard someone or something scratching at my door. I still remember that noise too. It was slow and loud, and it lasted for about 1 or 2 minutes. I was too scared to go out. I tried to convince myself that it was just my brother, but about 5 or 10 minutes after the scratching noise stopped, I heard him going out of his bedroom to go to the bathroom, and then he went back to sleep and didn't move again. At this point, I was really confused and scared, and I just couldn't go out of my bedroom anymore, and I never checked who or what it was behind the door, but there was definitely something there. At some point, I fell asleep, only because I was too exhausted. My bedside lamp was still on. I don't know how much I slept, but I woke up again during the night, and my lamp was off. I thought that the light bulb had burned out, but no, someone had turned the switch off. In the morning, as soon as I went downstairs, my brother came to me and asked if I heard the noise in the hall during the night, if I heard the footsteps, and if I heard a voice. I told him yes, except for the voice, and that's when he told me that after he went back to bed, he heard someone whisper his name, but loud enough to wake him up again, and that's when he saw his door half open, even though he was sure that he had just closed it. I also asked about the switch, but everyone just looked at me as if I was crazy and told me that no one went inside my room during the night. When my parents got divorced, we moved into our other house with my mum, and now only I go to my dad's every 2 weeks for the weekend. But since we moved, I feel less anxious when I'm at his house, and nothing else has really happened. The things I still don't understand are, why did my sister never experience anything? Or why did it just suddenly stop? And obviously, who or what was behind my door that night? The following story happened to me when I was 4 years old, and I honestly have no recollection of it. I only know what my family has told me. So when I was a kid, my dad worked in Mexico and would visit us about once a month, I would say. We lived in a small town in South Texas, and one day, before picking him up at the bus station, my mum told my siblings and I to use the bathroom at home so we wouldn't have to use them at the bus station. My brother and sister said that they saw me walk into the bathroom, but they just never saw me walk out. My mum opened the door to check on me, and I was just gone. With the layout of our apartment, it would be impossible for me to walk out without anyone noticing. My mum started panicking and called my grandpa, who was a police officer at the time. Within an hour, multiple police officers and neighbours were searching for me at our apartment complex with no luck. 3 hours later, my godmother found me in my bedroom, sound asleep on my bed. The weird thing is that there were multiple people searching inside the apartment as well, and they hadn't found me anywhere inside, including my bedroom. But it gets even weirder. When they asked me where I was, 4-year-old me allegedly said that I was in the sky making clouds with a duck using a machine that had a crank that you would spin on one side, and then the clouds would come out on the other side. I also kept saying that I would see a red light on the TV screen for a few weeks. I didn't fully believe this story growing up until I was visiting my grandma in Mexico City years later, and she confirmed it, saying that my mum had called her crying right after it happened. My family likes to joke that I was abducted by aliens, then returned home after a few hours. This all happened about 31 years ago, and to this day I still have no memories of any of